Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Polish mountain climbers were the most successful in the world. One of them was Wanda Rutkiewicz, the first woman to climb K2 and the third to scale Everest. She was one of the best Himalayan climbers in history and a pioneer of all-female climbing expeditions. During her climbing career, she successfully climbed 8 of the 14 8,000ers. She died at the age of 49 while attempting Kangchenjunga, the third highest mountain in the world, in May 1992. This is her story. Wanda Rutkiewicz was born on 4 February 1943 in Flunch, which is now in Lithuania but at that time was part of Poland. Early in the Second World War, the town was occupied first by the Soviets and then the Nazis in the year before Wanda was born. When she was an infant, the Soviets drove the Germans out again. After World War II, her family left for Poland and settled in Wrocław. The city had been reduced to ruins in the last weeks of the war. Years later, when Wanda was 5 and her brother Yurik was 7, the boy found an unexploded grenade in the rubble. The weapon detonated and Yurik was killed. Yurik and Wanda were very similar. They shared the same drive for life, willingness to take on challenges, and imagination. Her mother Maria did not work professionally and was a housewife. It was her father, Zbigniew Błaszkiewicz, an engineer, designer, polyglot, swimmer, and sharpshooter, who from an early age shaped the character of his daughter, who always tried to catch up with male role models. Already in primary school, Wanda was very ambitious. She always wanted to be the best, both in the classroom and in sports. Her years of youth were hard in a country with great difficulties after World War II. But thanks to scholarships and her unyielding persistence, she was able to study the subjects that most fascinated her: mathematics and physics, and also law and astronomy. She always found the time to practice several sports. After graduating from the Wrocław University of Technology, Wanda began working at the Institute of Power System Automation, and before the age of 30, she moved to the capital, where she worked at the Institute of Mathematical Machines. Before focusing on climbing, she trained track and field sports in secondary school, and then successfully played volleyball for many years. Wanda Rutkiewicz discovered her passion for mountaineering at the age of 18. Through the Wrocław High Mountain Club, she soon found her way to the Tatra Mountains, where she completed a mountaineering course in 1962. The beautiful young girl made a breakthrough into the male-dominated environment. Andrzej Zawada, leader of the Polish Himalayan expeditions, recalled that at first nobody realized that this calm girl, who appeared to be slightly from a different era, had an iron character, enormous willpower, and could be extremely disciplined in her actions. She aimed high from the very start, wanting to match her stronger colleagues. She loved adventure and challenges. She was a volcano of energy, unable to sit still. From the highest Polish mountains back in the 1960s, she started to frequent the Alps in Austria and then Mont Blanc, where she climbed the most difficult routes with Halina Kruger-Sierkamska. In 1968, she joined a group of Polish mountaineers with Halina to climb the eastern pillar of the Troll Wall in Norway. It was the first woman ascent of that challenging wall. In 1970, she climbed Lenenpeak in Pamir, which was her first 7,000er. At that time, the Polish government believed that the success of national climbers would bring glory to Poland, and thus the Ministry of Sport financed national expeditions to great mountains of the world. In 1972, Wanda Rutkiewicz took part in an expedition to Naushak, 7,492 meters in the Afghan Hindu Kush. Like many of her compatriots, Wanda found in the mountains a sense of freedom that was otherwise lacking in Poland at the time. The Polish alpinists who came of age in the 1970s were a breed apart. They sewed their own gear, sharpened their skills in the Tatars of southern Poland, then loaded up and drove overland to test themselves in the Pamirs, the Hindu Kush, and finally the Himalayas. Naturally, the leading Polish men had ambition of Everest, but Wanda beat them to it. Wanda Rutkiewicz was likable, smiling, easily made friends, but also had problems building deeper relationships. In 1970, she married Wojciech Rutkiewicz, with whom she soon separated. In 1982, she married Helmut Schapita, an Austrian physician. However, this relationship also quickly fell apart. According to Janusz Onyszkiewicz, a long-time president of the Polish Mountaineering Association, for Wanda, the mountains came first and all female-male matters were subordinated to this. Her greatest love was always the mountains. She made up for everything with her determination. She never allowed herself to make any concessions. Had she sensed they were suggested, she would have rejected not being treated on an equal footing. This would have been a blow to her. In her own words, it was an incurable disease. I fell in love with mountaineering. The starting point is love, and only later does a person wonder if it all makes sense. She also admitted that she was addicted to risk and danger. She lived from one expedition to the next. She spent all the money she earned on further expeditions. In 1975, she climbed Gesherbon 3 and set the Polish female altitude record, 7,946 meters. She only became famous, however, for her ascent of Mount Everest on 16 October 1978. She participated in a German expedition, climbing the world's highest summit as the third woman in history, the first European, and thus arousing the envy of her colleagues. The first Polish citizen. It was her first 8,000er. That same day, Karol Wojtyła was elected Pope, and already as John Paul II addressed Rutkiewicz during his homecoming visit. Apparently, it was the good Lord's wish that we both climb so high on the very same day. Just before the expedition began, she was not issued an athlete's card because she had been diagnosed with anemia. She traveled to Nepal at her own risk with a supply of injections and, fortunately for Himalayan mountaineering, managed to combat the illness and normalize her hemoglobin levels. After this success, she became very popular in Poland. She wrote books, gave interviews, and appeared on televisions. She took unpaid leave from work. She lived the life she wanted. She was free. She often traveled abroad. In Grey Communist Poland, such a life was a luxury. She wanted to follow her dreams, and she said that if you want something very much in life, you dream about it, you can always have it. Wanda Rutkiewicz struggled for a long time with the consequences of an open femur fracture she suffered near Elbrus in 1981, when a skier bumped into her and they tumbled 200 meters together down a slope. During her rehabilitation, she exercised so intensely that she suffered a repeated fracture. Throughout her long mountaineering career, Wanda was often involved in accidents that were bad enough to kill her. But each time she managed not only to survive, but also to regain the strength to continue on unrelenting objectives that she had set for herself. In 1982, still not in good shape, she led an unsuccessful women's expedition to K2. She reached the base camp at 5,000 meters above sea level, moving on crutches, with a splint in her leg aided by painkillers. She walked more than 100 kilometers. For a while, she was carried on the back of Jerzy Kokoczka, another great Polish Himalayan climber. The unusual sight of Wanda traversing the Baltoro Glacier on crutches became embedded in the memory of the local carriers, who remember the crazy Polish woman for a long time to come. The expedition was with no high-altitude photos or oxygen bottles, and there was a nice atmosphere of friendship and collaboration between the climbing ladies. Everything seemed to work, but unexpectedly, Halina Kruger-Syrokamska, who had 25 years of experience in the high mountains and had already climbed Gesherbum 2 without oxygen, fell ill, lost consciousness, and died, all within a few hours. Deeply depressed, the women lost much of their spirit, and then the weather got really bad, with strong swells of snow that blocked them all. It was impossible to climb, and they finally gave up. Wanda was back to K2 in 1984 with 3 Polish women in a Swiss expedition, but again they were forced to give up. Following year, Wanda and a Swiss guide climbed the Aconcagua in the Andes in alpine style. At 6,962 meters, it is the highest mountain in the American continent. In the same year, in 1985, taking advantage of the money and equipment left from the failed attempts on K2, Wanda Rutkiewicz managed to organize a women's expedition on Nanga Parbat. It was a small group of women climbers with whom she got along well on previous expedition. Anna Czerwenska, Kristina Faulaska, and Dobroslava Medvedchulov. Dobroslava, who decided to gain time bivouacking outdoors before the last assault on the summit, was caught by bad weather and fell ill and began to hallucinate. Wanda managed to rescue her and accompany her down to the fax ropes and reach her companions on the summit of Nanga Parbat in the midst of a storm. Against all odds, the 3 Polish women reached the top of an 8,000er without oxygen. Not satisfied with the success of her small expedition, Wanda joined Stefan Szapta and another Polish woman, Barbara Kozłowska, to attempt Broad Peak in the Karakoram. Unfortunately, Barbara, a good climber but not familiar with the snow, remained a long way back, and when crossing an ice-covered torrent, she was swept away by the current and died. The weather had worsened, and the other 2, who had already reached 7,800 meters of altitude, gave up the ascent. While descending, they found the body of their partner. In spite of failures and tragedies, Wanda never thought to stop, and what she desired more than anything else was to climb K2, which so far had resisted all her attempts. The year 1986 was tragic for K2. The biggest tragedy ever in the history of the Himalayan took place, due to bad weather, but also because of the exceptional number of climbers who stormed the mountains from all sides. In June 1986, 14 expeditions were already on the mountain. On 23 June 1986, she became the first woman and the first Pole in history to stand atop K2, considered the world's most difficult mountain to climb. During that season, up to 13 climbers died in their attempts to reach the summit, including the French Barrot couple with whom she had climbed. Wanda arrived at the base camp barely alive, returning alone in a heavy snowstorm and reportedly looking as if from the moon. This was the greatest achievement of her mountaineering career. Despite all the hardships and tragedies, Wanda organized an expedition with Krzysztof Ankiewicz for the ascent of another 8,000er Makalu. At the base camp was Reinhold Messner, whom she had met in other circumstances and who had always encouraged her. Wanda did not get to the top, but Reinhold did, and a few months later he also climbed Lhotse, his 14 8,000er, reaching the record of first ascent of all 14 highest mountains in the world. Wanda Rutkiewicz decided to concentrate on becoming the first woman to reach that goal. After the failure on Makalu, she lost no time and joined a winter expedition to Annapurna with Wanda Rutkiewicz, Krzysztof Wilecki, and Arthur Heiser. Unfortunately, she became ill with bronchitis and had to give up. Her companions reached the summit. In the summer of 1987, Wanda and Wanda Rutkiewicz were part of an expedition of 13 people from 6 different countries to Shishapangma. With that ascent, Rutkiewicz completed his crown of 14 8,000ers. Wanda reached the top with Ryszard Wieracki. She was the first Polish woman to reach the summit, as she had been on Everest and K2. In the spring of 1989, Wanda joined a British women expedition to Kangchenjunga to reach the base camp of Broadpeak, where Barbara Kozlowskowa died 4 years before. Wanda came here because she had always wanted to give a proper burial to Barbara. Kangchenjunga was her 5th 8,000er, which she climbed with the English alpinist Ronnie Lamford. The following year, in 1990, Makoto Hara invited Wanda and Eva Ankiewicz to join his expedition to Makalu. One of the Japanese members reached the top, but soon after that, Hara decided to block the expedition. Wanda had to give up her ascent, but she was determined to complete her 8,000er collection. In the summer of 1990, she went back to the Karakoram and climbed Kangchenjunga 1 with Eva. It was her 6th 8,000ers. In 1991, Wanda was in great shape and climbed 2 other 8,000ers, Choyo in September and the south face of Annapurna in November, soloing both of them. Quite a success. In May 1992, Wanda Rutkiewicz headed for Kangchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain in the world. It would have been her 9th 8,000er. It was her last expedition. She started the summit push with Mexican climber Carlos Carcello at 3:30 a.m. on May 12 from Campor at 7,950 meters. They both climbed for about 12 hours in heavy snowfall, but Carcello was the only climber to reach the summit of Kangchenjunga. On the way down, he found Rutkiewicz preparing to bivouac at 8,200 meters. She had no food, no tent, and no stove to melt water. Carcello tried to convince her to descend with him, but she insisted she would try for the summit the next day. This was the last time she was seen. Carcello descended and Rutkiewicz was never seen again. It's not known if Rutkiewicz reached the summit of Kangchenjunga. If she did so, she would have been the first woman to reach the top of the world's 3 highest mountains. The body of the finest female high-altitude mountaineer of the 20th century has never been found. Even if her body has not yet been found, her memory has not yet died. Her mother believed until the end of her life that her daughter had abandoned the Western world for a peaceful life in one of the Buddhist monasteries. To Wanda Rutkiewicz, death always seemed nearby, in the mountains and her personal life. According to one account, Wanda lost 25 friends and expedition partners in the mountains. She had lost her brother in childhood, and her father was murdered when she was 29. That proximity to death seemed to breed a certain comfort with the prospect. I never seek death, but I don't mind the idea of dying in the mountains. She once said, "It would be an easy death for me. After all that I have experienced, I am familiar with it. And most of my friends are there in the mountains waiting for me." In the last letter she wrote to her friend Marian, she said, "Here I am sitting at the edge of the world, cut off from everything that is important to others, but I am happy here where I am." Wanda Rutkiewicz was undoubtedly the finest female high-altitude climbers of the 20th century. She made 22 expeditions to the Himalaya, Karakoram, Hindu Kush, Pamir, and climbed extensively in the Andes. She reached the summit of 8,000ers. The story of Wanda Rutkiewicz tells that through strength of will, ambition, and great determination, dreams can be fulfilled and goals achieved. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment. And if you are new here and want to see more videos, please consider subscribing to the channel.